Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Finding Hidden IT Spend, Opportunities to Optimize, Right-Size, and Fund 2026 Initiatives. I'm Mary Beth Hamilton, Chief Marketing Officer here at Bluewave, and I have the pleasure of moderating this webinar today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's session should run around 45 minutes. It could be an hour, depending on how the conversation goes and questions get asked. We are recording this webinar, so you'll receive a copy post-event about 24 hours after it ends. And if you do have questions during the discussion, please feel free to use the Q&A function in the GoToWebinar interface. And if we have time at the end, we will be sure to answer them. And if we do not, we will follow up with you. Now, let me take a moment to introduce today's speakers. I have the pleasure of being joined by two members of Bluewave's Solution Advisory team. Kris Hogaboom is a Cloud Practice Lead here at Bluewave, and Martin Gale is a Cybersecurity Practice Lead. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about Bluewave in case you are not familiar with us or don't have a full understanding of the comprehensive scope of how we work with clients. Bluewave helps organizations bring clarity, confidence, and execution to technology decisions so that IT leaders can innovate boldly and grow faster. To do that, we deliver technology advisory services, and we are a sourcing partner, which means that we work along CIOs, VPs, directors of IT to assess, advise, and advocate throughout the technology buying and execution process to achieve deliverables and outcomes that are necessary for success. Clients count on us to help them right-size their environments, negotiate with vendors, optimize IT spend, and find new opportunities that they may not have known were available to them. We do this across CX, cloud, cyber, network, AI, and a whole host of other technology areas. Today, we support more than 10,000 organizations across the United States and internationally as well to help them uncover hidden costs and eliminate redundancy, and ultimately invest in parts of the business that allow them to grow and succeed. So today's session will reflect many of those items and that mission for Bluewave. So with that, let's go over the agenda and talk about how we can help you uncover hidden IT spend. First, we're going to set the stage by going through a little bit about the process, what we mean by hidden IT costs and opportunities. From there, we're going to dig into how we've helped clients bring this to life across data center strategies, Azure strategy, and then this final one we're calling Art of Possible. We unlocked about $6 million in savings, and that was across multiple facets of the technology operations. And then finally, I'll ask our experts to give me a few forward-looking comments on two questions. And if we have time, we'll be sure to open it up to Q&A. So let's get into the meat of it. Kris, over to you to help us define what do we mean and what are we going to be talking about from an IT cost perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary Beth. We have a kind of an internal joke that without fail, every time we get in front of a group of IT folks, the C-level folks always ask us, without us knowing any details on configurations or footprint, how much money can you save us? And we always come back with 15 to 30%. And we've been very good at hitting that target. In fact, we often hit higher than that target. And we do that because of the repetition and how many of these we've completed, right? So how we go about finding these, we've articulated over to the right. These are really, I guess, the 95th percentile of underutilized software licenses, cloud resources that are forgotten, a lot of over-provisioned resources in VMware, AWS, and Azure, Google as well. Duplicate and overlapping tools, we see that all the time. We see folks buy a tool for a need, for every single need, right? And those tools, we get tool sprawl. And then unmonitored SaaS renewals, right? And auto renew contracts are a really big one that we see as a really good opportunity to get in front of to negate the lock-in on pricing. Idle and DR, backup and DR environments are key. And then shadow IT and vendor sprawl. involved. So we see these a lot, and they make up that 15 to 30%, like I said, often higher. Next. So how do we go about doing this, right? Typically, we're uploading invoices in a secure link. We're reviewing these statements. We're looking for initial data points. Now, we've done this so many times that we understand what the going market rate is on these items. So first step, we upload the invoices. Second step, we're setting the baseline, often with interviews and tools. So the baseline is what we're going to measure against, right? Next up, we're prioritizing quick wins. This might be in a rapid assessment, the quick part of it, right? That is, typically we're taking a few silos of technology and we're looking for the sore thumbs. If we're going much deeper, it's typically a full assessment, which takes a little longer, right? And then the execute and expand is really where the savings, where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, if I may interject, Kris, right? So I wanted to just mention that you had mentioned a rapid versus a full assessment, right? So those are just, they're similar methodologies. However, one is much faster. The rapid is generated to get you some actionable intel within about a week, right? And so we'll pull all of that data in. And again, we do this every day, all day long. Kris and I do, evaluating different IT stacks. And so we can generate right away and say, oh, that cloud spend is probably 15% higher than a similar company in your industry. So that gives us a target of opportunity to do a deeper dive. I also wanted to mention too, sometimes I find myself in engagements where we're talking to a customer about cybersecurity. Maybe they want to deploy a new SIM or bring in a new service provider, and they're struggling with how am I going to figure out how to fund this, because maybe it's more than what I have budgeted. So we often ask them to back up a couple of steps and say, let's start with a rapid assessment. Let's see if there are targets of opportunity, help them pay for what they want to do with what we find. And it may extend the engagement a little bit, but it gives them so much more intelligence on their overall IT spend. They can now make those decisions in a much faster time frame than if they didn't have that intelligence. Because when we try to present it to you, we give it to you in a very easy to read format. Because if you had to go out and pull invoices and look at this and look at that and all these different things, you're like, what did that other one say? What did this one say? It gets pretty confusing in a complex environment. So I just wanted to mention that as well, how we utilize this in engagements.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to note that often organizations will come at it with that cost savings lens, but we're able to sort of take a moment to sort of think through, is that the right strategy? And then also, how do you deploy those added resources? So let's bring that to life. We have 3 real world stories that I'm going to have you take us through. So this first one, Kris, you want to kick us off?
Yep. So 1,000+ employees, equity backed, cost takeout's always number one, right? Either we're merging companies together or peeling them apart. They're always looking for efficiencies. The incumbent vendor was not keeping pace with the organization, right? So we came in with an assessment that we didn't get a lot of traction with at first. So we actually were told that $50,000, Martin, was the.
Now with this one, I remember this one specifically, right? So I had to go through some scrutiny with the private equity firm, right? And so they didn't know us as an organization.
Right.
And so this was, you might have heard me tell this story before, Mary Beth, is I showed up and there were like 14 financial people from the PE firm. And I showed up, and so I was stammering a bit. I was like, oh my gosh, what do you, and they're like, how are you going to save me money?
Yep.
And so I said, okay, we're going to do this assessment, right? And so they're like, okay, let's go further. They put me in front of the customer, and the customer had some very defined needs, right? The PE firm on one hand said, we need to take some cost out. And the customer said, I have been with my incumbent provider for 7 years. I haven't got a hardware refresh, and my disaster recovery as a service program is not really working. I have kind of this half-baked, but they don't let us test it. And they were on some managed services and they were on some self-hosted services, right? So they had some significant things they wanted to accomplish. That we'd like to solve this. We'd like to be more highly available. We'd like to be more consistent in our platform. And oh, by the way, we need to save a bunch of money. So I did a lot of diagrams for them. And, you know, we brought in a lot of, we did the analysis, we did a lot of providers in, we did a decision analysis, we went through the process, we advocated on their behalf. And let's go to the next slide real quick. And at the end of the day, what we really were able to get as an outcome was a fully working disaster recovery as a service platform. They were able to let go of all of their self-managed from the hypervisor down in one of their sites, which ultimately became their disaster recovery site. And on top of all of that, we ended up pulling $30,000 a month in cost savings, and they got complete brand new refresh of hardware. So the customer was absolutely ecstatic with the outcome, and they achieved every single outcome that they wanted to. They were check the box, check the box, check the box.
Mm-hmm. And Martin, what did they reinvest that money into?
We didn't spend it on another initiative we were working, but what they were trying to do, they actually pulled up their financials and said over the next 18 months, and we're in that period actually right now, and they said we want to go more of an active, high availability scenario where we're doing disaster recovery in both of our data centers, where one site would be DR to the other and vice versa, and we can shut down an entire site and not lose any of our connectivity and our inbound customer access to our applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I love about this story, and it's something we hear regularly from other customers, is that component of that PE backed organization and the fact that they're always looking for opportunities to optimize, but then also to sort of drive consolidation, make sure they're operating as efficiently as possible. And in addition into investing in new projects, being able to, you know, take it to the bottom line as well. So we were able to support them in both areas here. Before we go to the next case study, I'm going to call an audible and throw a question in here because VMware is mentioned on the slide. And obviously it's a topic that is regularly sort of discussed, and we've supported clients through, you know, decisions and considerations there. Martin, are there any sort of thoughts that you want to share around how organizations should think about VMware today with the changes that have occurred?
Yeah, I have a ton of thoughts on that, right? So first of all, we do know that Broadcom is kind of the X factor these days. They started a little over a year ago. You know, they bought VMware and they said, we're going from one model, which was perpetual licensing, to subscription. And then now we're going to increase the costs. We're going to put minimums. We're going to put penalties if you don't renew your licensing. And so it created a lot of upstir in the industry because you're budgeted for a certain amount, right? And then all of a sudden, I think the lowest, correct me if I'm wrong, Kris, I think 2x times what a customer was budgeted, as much as 10x is what we've seen.
That's what we're seeing. Yep.
Right. And so they're unexpected costs. So what is that doing in the industry? It's number one is if you are vested in VMware, you love VMware, you've got a skill set in VMware, let's look at an opportunity to go to a cloud service provider. Maybe the managed services part of it will fit up to the hypervisor level. And then you can take those skills and that time that you were spending managing that and spending on innovation and other things to propel your business forward. You're also going to get out of the what I call ping, power, and space model, right? You're not paying for a colo, you're not paying for the transport, a lot of those services including. So that's the number one option. The flip side of that is this is a very emotional space, right? And some people are very upset about these unexpected changes and the costs associated with them. And they absolutely don't want anything to do with VMware. And that's fine, right? Because that's what's great about Bluewave's model, right? Is we're completely agnostic, regardless of what our personal backgrounds or any of that stuff is. We're going to come in and help you identify what your requirements are, then pick a solution and help you get and achieve the outcomes that you're looking for, rather than focusing on the technology. So in this particular case, it's finding another hypervisor alternative that can replace the vCenter, that can replace your ESXi host, but maybe you can still have a similar experience, so the learning curve for your invested skills for your staff is still applicable. So we're seeing a lot of interest in things like Platform 9, Apache Cloud Stack, you know, and things to that nature. And Nutanix is another one. And there's a bunch of other players. And my forecast for the future is you're going to see those. I think I talked about it in a presentation I did earlier, that although it seems like it's the emergence of new technologies, these technologies have actually been around for a long, long time. It's just now most of us are hearing about them more. And so we're looking at them as viable options. And as that technology is presenting itself, they're providing more and better and more efficient ways for us to move from the old platforms to the new ones, and taking into consideration of cost, reduction of costs, the ease of the migration, what is the migration cost, and oh, by the way, the complexity of changing from one file type to another file type, right? Because you're changing hypervisors. So that's kind of a quick snapshot on my take on VMware.
Yeah. Pain always seems to drive change.
Yeah.
Perfect. I couldn't resist asking it because I know it's a passion topic and we talk about it a lot. So just wanted to give it, make sure we touched on it briefly here. Okay, so let's move over to our next case study. This was a national money transfer and financial services company, international, spanning 60 plus countries. So Kris, take us through sort of the situation, the background here, and then we can talk about how we helped them.
So this company was very hesitant to let us run any tools, right? They had an incumbent provider that wasn't reporting back correctly. Costs were going up every single month. I mean, we watched it in our tool sets just continue to climb. Martin ran Chronum, and we were able to track that spend month over month. This engagement, well, Martin, you'd say maybe 4 months, 5 months.
Yeah.
Every month we watched it go up. Bluewave came with an actionable plan, and the incumbent would match the numbers that Bluewave had. I believe, and I don't quote me on this, but I believe the customer may have shared some of the data points from our reporting. So we came with an actionable plan, and that the incumbent did not lower the bill. I mean, we'd be running the reports in the background. We'd see that it would continue to climb. We'd meet with the customer. Frustration was boiling over that the spend was out of control. So he decided to go with Bluewave, and recently that was a recent win that we just had, and you know, the customer, I think, will now start to see those bills continue to trend down because we came with a plan. It wasn't just throwing numbers out. Yeah. We had a step-by-step process that articulated the downward spiral of the spend.
Yeah, I think what was interesting about this one, some of the things that we discovered, right, is, and I believe the CIO, he was new into that position, right? And he came, he was the CISO, he got promoted to the CIO. And so he'd been given a charter like to get costs under control, and Azure being a target of opportunity. When we connected with our tool, and we found a few pretty interesting things. It's number one, he wasn't being coached on how to leverage savings plans, reserve instances, and hybrid benefits within the framework of deploying Azure resources, right? So he was using what we call a pay-as-you-go. He was using it through a provider, right? And they had actually, and I hope you don't mind us telling this, but he said to me, he said, "You have given me more intelligence than my provider has given me, and they had offered this to me at a cost of $50,000, and we did it at no cost to the customer, right?" So I think that was pretty impressive. And like Kris said, we came with an actionable plan. I debriefed them. I was like, okay, you're pay as you go. We had watched him at this point. By the time we did the briefing, we were about a month and a half into the engagement. And we had saw his bill go from like 40-something thousand. He had gone up to 60 and was on a trajectory. What's cool about the tools we do use is they do predictive analysis, right? So what does that mean? We'll go in and we'll look at so in these hyperscalers, you can define a budget object and say, I only want to spend something, and you can get alerts. And if you haven't done that, and more people or more organizations, I should say, haven't done that and have done that, what our AI will do, will look at it and it'll say, okay, you have done this over the last 2 or 3 months, and it will project based on your current spend what objects you are running and how they are performing. Excuse me. And it'll say, we predict that your bill will be X at the end of the month. And we were spot on. I was giving him monthly reports, and we watched him go. And I believe right before he signed, he had gone from 40K up to 104K, right? And we had predicted it accurately throughout the process. He also had no idea how to use reserve instances. He didn't know what hybrid benefits were. And he didn't know that he could use savings plans, right? So we did all of this analysis. And what's interesting, I think Kris is correct, that our data was provided to the incumbent, which, okay, that's the customer's choice. It's their data, right? We had briefed them, we had coached them, we had given them some actionable intel. And oh, by the way, our tool does a pretty good job of finding security holes, which we did. We found anonymous access to blob storage. We found RDP access to any IP on the planet. And we told them exactly what it is we found and how to go and fix it. Right. That was just a bonus, right? Yeah. He gave it to the incumbent. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kris.
The piece that really stood up for me was the month after month or week after week that we met. He didn't understand how to make the changes. And I think that's where our provider was key in the agnostic approach, that we picked someone who could implement what we found in the reporting. So that to me was absolutely key in the success and the signage of that customer.
The other thing too, what he didn't realize is there is a ton of funding in the hyperscaler space in both AWS and Azure, right? His incumbent did not have access. The way that Microsoft and AWS provides that funding is based on the provider's ability to execute and how many they have done, right? So if they have a good track record and they've done hundreds, not just a few of these transitions to the hyperscaler, they get more funding. So we always make sure that we bring providers to the table, as long as they're a right fit, that have the maximum amount of funding. And so what finally, when they made the decision to go with us, is not only did they, the incumbent was given the chance, they failed to fix all of the things that we provided. They finally signed a contract with our provider that we introduced them to, and they gave them an additional $60,000 to use just on the labor portion or professional services to get the things fixed that we identified in our assessment, which I thought was pretty fantastic.
I thought that was amazing. Yeah, which providers actually pay you to fix the problems? I think that was key.
Yeah, and what I love about this is, we came in, we used the tools to help them see where the savings areas were. We helped them, we gave them options on the right partner that would enable them to be able to capitalize on those savings. And because we understand how these cloud providers work, these programs and incentives available to them, we were able to help align them with an organization that, in this case, obviously had high levels of Microsoft certification and was able to tap into the many incentive programs that Microsoft runs in order to capture consumption, but also ease sort of deployment and migration. So, and then I'm confident that we've been alongside this client for the ride to make sure that execution has gone according to plan and that they have realized these savings.
I think the other Bluewave tap on the shoulder is that we'll be able to leave that tool in place and watch that trend down. So we're side by side, shoulder to shoulder with the customer as we get towards the number that we advertised during the sale process. So the tool will continue to run and continue to guide us all.
Yeah, the other thing too is I'd love to mention and call out is we have when we get to the last A of our advise, advocate, to advocate, what is it? Assess, advise, advocate, right? So the advocate portion of our methodology, we have a commercial services group, right? And so once Kris and I finish the engagement, and the provider is starting to execute on their work, we hand it off. We have our own project managers. We have our own team of commercial services folks they keep an eye on things, and they're going to advocate on behalf of the customer throughout the entire deployment process and even beyond that, making sure that contracts are executed, the SLAs are met, and if there's anything, sometimes a customer is uncomfortable in confrontational type situations, like, oh, the provider promised this and they didn't do it. We will advocate on your behalf and step up and say, look, Mr. Provider, you need to deliver this, and the customer is unhappy. So we'll even take that portion of advocation for you.
Good point.
And what I also love about it is the reality of it is because we support so many organizations, we have more weight with many of these providers, aside from the fact that maybe we're okay with confrontation, but I think we probably do it from a partnership perspective. But, you know, we know how to work it, and we carry, you know, a decent amount of weight given the scale with which we support and influence. Okay, so our next one, we are flipping over to the healthcare industry. Kris, you want to kick this one off, and then Martin, I know you're close to this one as well, so we can
this was a massive opportunity for Bluewave. Sales team did a fantastic job of getting us in front of the right people. We had a PE acquisition that was then led to a divestiture. So we started off with security. We took a lot of looks at infrastructure. We took a lot of looks at loaded labor rates and overlaps, a lot of looks at tools and overlapping of tools. So our main objective was cost takeout on this one. First step of the process is going to be cybersecurity, as we learned yesterday. Multiple providers, tons of tools, such a great opportunity to consolidate and to leave the company in a better financial position than we found them.
So we can flip over to strategy. Yeah, and I think the results on this right side speak for themselves. But before we get there, let's go through, like, this was the art of the possible, right? So let's go through it.
This one was super challenging because I think when we were first introduced, the organization didn't know Bluewave, right? And we were working with IT director, IT manager, IT professionals, right? Because not only do we use tools, but especially in an organization this large, when we were looking holistically across the entire organization, right? There's a lot of interviews that we do. There's a lot of checklists that we follow. There's a lot of things. This one actually took almost 10 months to get to the end of it. And the reason it took so long is initially, like I said, they didn't know us. And I'm just going to say it as it be transparent. The IT staff didn't want us there, right? Yeah. But their leadership wanted us there, the C-level folks, right? And the cybersecurity, which was a big point of interest, right, had gone through multiple CISOs, actually 5 by the time we got to those numbers that you were looking at, right? Yeah. So there was a lot of turmoil within the company, going through a divestiture, now owned by a PE staff. They're hearing nothing but cost takeout, cost takeout. And guess what? By the way, they still had to service their patients, right? They had 500 locations. They have doctors, and they have all of the things that they were doing. So what we've determined, and one of our essays is famous for saying this, right, is we help them turn a decision that would take months, if not years, into minutes, right? And it was because of all of the due diligence that we did, and we found that the local staff just didn't have the time. It's not that they weren't good at what they were doing. It's not that they were expert and they were very professional when they did work with us, right? It's just they didn't have the bandwidth to go out and search the marketplace, to go through the interviews, to fill out the checklist, to run the tools, to analyze the data that was found, to put it in a readable spreadsheet, to present it back to the C-level folks so they have a clear understanding of what we found and where their opportunities were. So all of that is, I want to say, we put several hundred hours of our time. So I think that's kind of key also. And I've heard a lot of our sales folks tell, prospect customers this is we will put some skin in the game, right? Is we will invest our SA team to come in and do this, right? And the risk to the organization is very low because we might do an SOW, and I'm not going to say we do everything for free because sometimes we do a statement of work that will cost. And I believe in this case they did pay for it, but in many opportunities we will do a lot for the client, with no financial risk at all to them. And we come in, we don't ask for any sort of admin rights, any of that stuff. We do everything read-only, capture data, and we're very transparent, and so the customer can make the decision. And then if you ask our opinion, we're definitely going to be biased because we do know the marketplace, right? So like Kris said, what we found in this particular one, we found a ton of overlapping tools. We found over the course of multiple CISOs had come in and were trying to build their own environment. I don't know the semantics of why they left, but they had 40-something people in that group, right? And they were doing a lot of things inefficiently, like reviewing log files manually, which is crazy in today's age of using AI. And so what we did was we did a cursory look in the marketplace, and we went out to 3 well-known providers that we knew could perform, because we'd won deals with them before, and we said, okay, at a very high level, based on this amount of devices, this amount of people, and this scope of work, what could you do? And they came back and said we could do it. And so when we looked at the cost of, we took in the head count, we took in the cost of the tools, we took in the cost of everything, and we laid it all out, and we said, okay, based on what the service provider, and we lined them up, tool per tool, and service by service, and task by task. And we said, this is crazy, because we can do this for $10 million a year, and actually probably a little bit less, but it was a very conservative. And so that really got their attention. I mean, that's as Kris would say to his son, that's a lot of simoleons.
I think we went from 16 to 6, I think, in the end, right?
No, I think it was $6 million in savings, so we could have got them down to 10. It was 10 million in annual spend. Remember, this was an organization with 500 locations, 26,000 users, right? So a pretty significant size organization. And again, they were under a lot of cost optimization scrutiny from the new PE firm that was funding them, that said, hey, we think there's duplication of effort. Well, we kind of proved it.
And I think that those savings would even change even further, the further and deeper we go into the environment. So we were really focused on infrastructure, focused on loaded labor rates, focused on tooling, right? I think if we had gotten into networking and some of the other mobility, for example, those savings would have ballooned. And I'm confident that once we're able to realize those savings, the rings on the tree will continue to grow.
I love the story because it demonstrates the impact that we can have. And just as you said, we were biased. I was about to say the beauty of us is that we're agnostic, but I think it's a really important distinction that we have a broad depth of sort of portfolio of suppliers and partners that we work with, and deep expertise. So we're able to be both, right? We are biased in the fact that we know what will work. Once we know what the opportunities are, we're biased in the aspect of we know who you should work with, and because we've seen the results and we know that they can deliver.
I think we have a bird's eye view with 10,000 customers. I think we see things that a lot of other people don't. So we see installs, we see successful and correct billing, we see migrations that fail and succeed. So it's not just about picking the right tools, it's about picking the right ultimate outcome. And I think that bird's eye view is very key into Bluewave's success.
Yeah, and I think too, what we I personally have learned a lot in this space, right, is how to properly analyze what the total cost of ownership of a particular set of infrastructure is, right? So if you're running it on premise, right? Oh, it's just the cost of my VMware licenses. Well, not really, right? Because there's a lot of other things. And so when we're trying to help customers understand that, you know, we'll pull their local power bills. We'll look at, you know, maintenance contracts and how many hours their staff is spending. And if you think about the landscape in cybersecurity today, right? And when I was, you know, an engineer and I was managing my own storage area networks, I used to update the firmware maybe once a quarter or every 6 months. I think you're doing, you know, storage firmware once a month. You're doing your ESXi hosts almost on a weekly basis, right? You're doing your hypervisor, your vCenter, your servers, your applications. I mean, all of that is extremely time consuming. Even if you have a tool,
Right.
you still have to go look at it and remediate when something fails, right? So when you really lay all those things out and you look at the cost of your maintenance contracts, your support contracts, and oh, by the way, your boss is saying, I need you to be more innovative. And you're like, I have no time.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Because what are we all learning these days? We're learning AI. How do we prepare for AI? How do we think about it? How do we do it securely in our business? And how do I find the time to do that when I don't even have the time to finish what I'm working on today? So you're laying all of those things out, and you're just putting them in sort of a readable, easy to read format for the customer. And then you have Kris and I and a whole SA team who we have a pretty good level of expertise in that space because we've all done it, right? And so we can give you good advice on what does that look like, what does that mean, and many times customers say, what would you do?
Right.
And we always feel like that we're an extension of your staff, right? And I think that is also another thing that's unique in Bluewave, because we're going to always try to make what we think is the right decision for you and your business.
Yeah, and I think beyond, and you touched on it earlier, right? It's that partnership aspect, and then that we're there with them through the execution and realization of these savings.
Right.
So it's not just the hard work of identifying them, it gets even harder of making sure that they're executed appropriately and realized. So that's where sort of that full life cycle partnership of what we're able to provide to our clients. So now I want to go into 2 questions. The first one being, what is your go-to area for exploring and uncovering savings opportunities? Who would like to go first? Kris, over to you.
Yeah, everyone's going to think I'm going to say cloud, and I'm not. I see the networking components, auto renew. I see MPLS technology still in place. I see all of these fun things that need to be optimized, which can fund cybersecurity, which can fund managed services, which can fund DR. So I love that our team tends to focus on mobility and networking first, because with Martin, we get to utilize the savings that came from that. And so I see that as being key in our success here in the infrastructure and cloud team, are the savings that they're seeing on the network and the mobility side of the fence. So I don't start with cloud. I start with what connects us together.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with the mobility management, right? Because we can turn those savings around really quickly. So a new opportunity that I feel like I'm seeing when I'm doing assessments with customers now, as I call it low-hanging fruit, is O365 or M365, right? Especially if we're doing an assessment in the Azure platform. Because usually the customer asks me like, oh, you're in Azure. We all know that's the back-end functionality of O365. Can you not do an assessment of my O365? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. Of course we can, right? But we do more than just pull an inventory and all this. We do a lot of coaching on how your licenses are. We're even going to look at if you have a bunch of E3s, which are at a certain cost, and let's say half of your users are only using the web client to access them, is there potential there for you to downgrade them to a lower level license? And maybe they need some more space in OneDrive, so we'll recommend an add-on. But that sort of intel, right, it can save you a lot of money. And again, if you're trying to fund or you're trying to figure out how to, get your costs under control in one area because you have a cybersecurity project that you would like to fund, right? And so I having been, IT director, I've been a CIO and mostly just an engineer my entire career, right? I know what it's like to get in front of a CEO and try to ask for money. And it's a whole lot easier if you have a plan and your budget is staying fairly level, as opposed to like, oh, I need an extra, you pick the 6 figures or 7 figures to get that done, right?
Yeah, what do we see too with these E5s? We see people that are double and triple paying because they're using CrowdStrike, for example, but yet they have the same SKUs in the Microsoft platform. So that cross-pollination has led to a lot of savings, in that we know that you're double and triple paying for certain functionalities. So the auditing of Azure and O365 has been key.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've unlocked all these savings and we're going and we're building our budget for 2026. We want to keep it flat. Where are we reinvesting?
All right. You
Who wants
probably,
to go first?
I'll
Your
go
turn,
first.
Martin.
Go ahead.
You've gone first on all the other ones, Kris, right? And I think you probably can already guess, right? I have been fortunate enough in the last few weeks. I've met with a lot of pretty large IT staffs from CTO level down into, the sysadmin, pretty good size enterprises, right? And then, and so I base some of what I'm hearing, what I see in the industry, what I hear from our service providers, and of course AI is in the middle of all of that, right? And so my prediction is 2026 will be the year when most organizations, even those that you would consider SMB space, and there's different definitions of what that are, but are going to be looking at AI readiness. It's like, okay, I've heard from hundreds of CIOs or their subordinates say, yeah, my boss is telling me I need to implement AI, but I have no idea what we're going to use it for. We just know it needs to be secure, and we're not doing it. We're not going to use ChatGPT or do something on the public internet. So, okay. So the AI readiness is number one, is looking at how do I prepare not just my staff, but my infrastructure for what is to come, right? To use that, right? And so with a lot of the new AI technologies, it's driving towards inference where you don't have to have massive GPU stacks, right? So if you have less than, I believe the latest number is 20 billion queries or parameters, right? That you can do it with CPU. So, but I still need to clean my data. I need to, I don't want to index or put a bunch of data inside of AI to learn it when it's useless data, right? So to me, I feel like that data is, think of it like crude oil. If it hasn't been processed, refined, and cleaned, it's just like the old adage, GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So I think AI readiness, I know I personally am learning a lot about how to coach customers in AI readiness. And I think a lot of the funding that we have seen in the past, Kris, that we have said, oh, let's fund a cybersecurity project, or let's fund a cloud project. It's going to be, let's fund an AI readiness project.
Right.
And then it's a lot of, from our perspective, it's a lot of coaching customers, helping them understand what it is for that. And then getting to that point, it's like, okay, if I'm doing this readiness, now what am I going to do with AI?
Yeah.
There's kind of a productivity sort of end user bucket. And there's like, then how do I plug it into my ERP system to get useful predictive analytics to help my business grow, to make more revenue, to become more efficient, to make me better than my competitor type stuff, right? Yeah. So that was a pretty long answer too.
Yeah.
No, I like it. We hadn't mentioned AI really up until this point, so I'm glad we got it in there. Would have been a miss. Kris, what do you have for us?
I think in the beginning we moved everything to cloud, and then we realized that not everything was made for cloud, and now we're pulling things back. And with pulling things back, I think Martin's correct. We have a data classification issue. We don't know what data is where. So I think the classification of the data, the tagging it for HR, for accounting, for whatever and whatnot, is going to propel 2026. I see that being as a key focal point of 2026 is the classification of data, the pulling and pushing from cloud. And then it seems like in the beginning when we moved everything to cloud, it seemed like the right thing to do. I think we're pushing everything to AI now, and that's why the outcomes aren't there yet, because we haven't focused on outcomes that actually will drive the business forward technologically. A lot of it's for fun as we're testing. So I think we're going to start to see some really fantastic use cases. Some competitive advantages are going to be really apparent. I think if you're not using AI today and your competitor is, I think the distance between you and them is going to be exponentially more and further. And so that's, I see the focus on oil, just like Martin said, the focus is on data.
I love it. So we are right on time.
Are we giving anything away today, Mary Beth? No prizes?
No prizes, but a rapid assessment, which
A rapid
based on what we
assessment.
just went through earlier, I think that prize like is much
Free
better
rapid
than anything else
assessment.
that I could offer.
Yes, ma'am.
But that's just part of our core offering. So anyone who would like to win a rapid assessment, in all seriousness, please know that rapid assessment is an incredible tool that Bluewave leverages, as well as more deep dive assessments to be able to uncover these types of opportunities for our clients. We are always happy to have a strategy session to go through how, what kind of findings and results are there, as well as just talk about the changing face and opportunities that we're seeing in the market. We didn't dive deep on it here, but both of our experts touched on AI a bit at the end here. It is another area where we have deep expertise from a practice perspective. So everyone will receive a follow-up note with a copy of this recording, as well as links to some other resources and contact information for our speakers. But Kris, Martin, thank you for a wonderful conversation. Thank you to our attendees. And we look forward to doing this on a regular basis. So with that, we'll wrap. Thank you.
Thank you.